After Dusty Dune Galaxy, I'm starting to think this game gets better the further along you get into it. Although in fairness, I've kind of been feeling that over the last few stages. In fact, I'm pretty sure in the last few segments I have mentioned almost the exact same thing, which I think is a testament to the argument that's frequently made about Mario Galaxy getting better as you move along. And as I've previously alluded to, I'm starting to develop a bit of a hypothesis here that the reason people think that is because most of the stages that involve moving from planetoid to planetoid take place in the first half of the game. This is of course only if you're thinking about the grand galaxies and not the smaller ones. But I also think that the further along I've gotten, the less even the objectives within the stages have felt similar. Honey Hive Galaxy felt very similar regardless of which star that I picked, and likewise with Gusty Garden Galaxy. But Freeze Flame Galaxy had 3 stars that basically took place on entirely different levels. Now this won't always be the case going forward. Off the top of my head, Sea Slide Galaxy is like the 11th level in the game and almost every star feels the exact same. But up until this point in time, that's kind of how it felt. Let's see if that continues with the desert-themed Dusty Dune Galaxy. Dusty Dune is actually the 3rd large level in the Bedroom Dome. The 3 previous domes only contained 2 large galaxies each, but from the bedroom and onwards, there's 3 large galaxies in each dome, which I think also reaffirms the uptick in difficulty that you get towards the end of the game. Right off the bat, I will say that Dusty Dune Galaxy earns points for me because it feels like a natural evolution of the previous desert stages of the franchise. And I think they had an excellent track to go along, and obviously I would think that because it reminds me of Shifting Sandland. The first objective of Dusty Dune Galaxy is soaring on the desert winds. Once again, I gotta praise the spectacle here. The view when you land on this area and see all that's ahead of you is pretty awesome. There's somehow so much going on despite the fact that there's a clear linear path in the direction you're supposed to move. This is not a sandbox. This feels like the flame mission that I mentioned in the last level, the one I ever so eloquently compared to Sonic in the Adventure era, when you're clearly meant to move in a single direction but you have unconfined controls. This of course would differ from the 3D Land and 3D World approach in which you're stuck to 8 cardinal directions. In any case, your 2 obstacles as you move forward along this objective are the dry bones as well as the tornadoes. The tornadoes are pretty cool because you jump into them and you spin up, you can kind of do this hover to get through the stage. If you use the tornado right, you're able to make it towards the pipe maze. After that, you get a full-on 2D section, complete with thwomps and piranha plants. Something I really appreciate is you have the ability to just hop along on the sand. You'll be moving really slow, but it's completely optional. But if you're skilled enough to manage to stay on the blocks up ahead, you can move a lot more swiftly. It's the classic 2D approach where an upward, more difficult route will award you with more efficiency. This is not normally the case with classic Mario, but again, to bring up Sonic, it was the case with him, specifically in Sonic 2. And I'm pretty sure this is the 3rd or 4th time I make that comparison on my channel. But anyway, you'll eventually make it to a fire flower and you're able to shoot your way forward while blasting all the piranha plants out of your way. After that, there's a mini chase segment where a giant boulder is chasing you, and then you make it out of the segment and you get to a section where you have to traverse upwards. This of course requires you to take tornadoes as well as avoiding these evil chickens. After that, you just gotta keep using the tornadoes to get upwards. You'll move on to some wall jumping, including a segment where you have to actually slide down the wall pretty far before making the jump. This whole area is a very fun platforming segment. Even the last bit where you gotta get to the star, they don't just give it to you, you gotta work your way to it, carefully standing on the blocks in order to make sure you get your star. All in all, I think this stage does a very good job putting your platforming skills to the test, and I don't think it's a coincidence that a star that requires so much platforming is very 2D heavy. I've mentioned that this is the first 3D Mario game with 2D sections a few times throughout the past few segments. I didn't really share my thoughts on it because I didn't think it was necessary to share my thoughts. That seems to be more of a thing in certain other franchises that I keep mentioning. I think the way it's been implemented in the Mario franchise so far has been pretty good. It doesn't really overwhelm the game, it feels pretty natural to jump in and out of these segments. And ultimately, I think the fact that Mario fans just kind of are okay with both 2D and 3D make the difference here. Like, it feels weird even talking about this. This is much more a Sonic discussion. Nobody is ever complaining about the implementation of 2D stuff in 3D games. But in fairness, Nintendo is also not making a 3D Mario game mostly 2D. So that's probably why nobody's talking about it. In any case, that was a fun star. I enjoyed it, both in the 3D sections and the 2D sections. Mission number 2 is blasting through the sand. This one is also really fun. As soon as you start, you gotta take on these 5 Pokeheads. Once you defeat them all, a bigger red Poke will stick out. This one's actually a bit harder to defeat. I think your best bet is to try to jump on its head after it slams into you. And I'll admit, it took me quite a few attempts to figure that out. Once you beat it, it'll give you a launch star to an area in the sky, and you'll do a little bit of planet jumping until you get to this area of quicksand right here. You'll be forced to move along in this fast space until you can collect the 5 segments of the blue star. At one point, you even have to grab a green shell in order to open a treasure chest to get the 5th piece. If you manage that, you'll be able to move on to the next segment, where you're allowed to move in one of 2 directions, both of which will offer you a fairly decent platforming challenge in order to get through. After that, it's a fairly narrow platforming traversal where you gotta dodge enemies and avoid falling into the sand. This is kind of a 2-sided segment. There's these little holes in the floor that'll take you over to the other side. Basically, you gotta go to one side and ground pound so that it makes the platform stick up on the other side, and then you gotta quickly run yourself back as fast as you can to get to the platforms and grab the star before it goes back. Again, I think this is a star that puts your platforming skills and movement to the test. Speed, reflexes, balance, and even general control of Mario is all at play here. It's a fun and unique challenge, and honestly it just feels like a really good start in a 3D Mario game, gravity gimmick or otherwise. The third objective is Sun-Baked Sand Castle. The gimmick here is that the sand is rising and lowering depending on where you are on the map. In the first section, the test is to dodge the platforms that are falling down towards you into the ground. As long as you can avoid getting crushed, you're able to make it to the next segment. Over here, the platform or stage is basically rising from underground. You need to figure out how to go up and down this tower and collect the 5 star chips. This will range between wall jumping, grabbing the green shell to break open a chest, and really just figuring out how to traverse all around this tower. Once you do that, you gotta wall jump your way to the top to take the launch star. You get to this small planetoid that keeps increasing in size, and you gotta defeat the cactus plant to make it over to the next planetoid. Over here, it's a pair of planetoids where you gotta drop down to the bottom one and send some melons upwards so you can use those to flick at the Pokey up ahead of you. After you defeat the Pokey, you get yet another launch star. You land right beneath the star, although technically you're right on top of it because once you drop down, you realize the camera is just upside down. This final segment here is a 2D platforming challenge. But rather than just being a basic 2D platforming challenge, everything is upside down, and you also have a lowering, or I guess rising sand level to worry about too. So it's more than just simple platforming, it's a speed test. Get to the star before you suffocate, and you can move on. By now the map will show you that there are 3 stars you're able to collect in addition to the 3 you already have, and that's not including the purple comet star that we'll collect at the end of the game. Which means in addition to Battle Rock Galaxy, this is the second and final level to have 7 stars. And one of them is a green star, but I'll be discussing why that's relevant later. The green hidden star is hidden in blasting through the sand. So there's a planetoid shaped like a ring with a bunch of boulders rolling around on it. I didn't really go into detail about it the last time because it wasn't as relevant. There's a hungry Luma. It's actually pretty well hidden and might be hard for somebody to find. The only reason I was able to find it is because the launch star that it leads to has one of those gimmicks where you can actually fly right through the launch star without moving forward. Generally speaking, when a launch star has that, it's because you're able to backtrack through the last few planetoids. And really the only reason the game would even do that is because it wants you to collect star bits. Once that happened, I figured the hungry Luma had to be around here somewhere even though I couldn't see it. And sure enough, it was beneath the nearby platform. There's also a hidden star beneath those boulders so that you can use that to crack the boulders and collect all the star bits if you need more for the hungry Luma. After that, our starry friend will transform, and you'll get this uniquely shaped pyramid planetoid to head inside. The gimmick here has to do with the sand both rising and lowering up and down this prism. As the sand moves, you gotta traverse along the walls to collect the 5 silver stars. This could be seen as a tedious challenge, but I think it's a good one. There's a bit of a puzzle element to it, as well as reflexes involved. And once you collect the 5 silver stars, you'll be able to collect your hidden green star. At this point, there was a speed comet for one of the stars, so you gotta retread your steps and defeat those 5 Pokies again, as well as the big red one. There's a 4.5 minute timer here, which seems like a lot, but I think a lot of players might actually need most of that time. The only thing I will say is that the segment at the very end where you're meant to go through the narrow platforms, they removed all the enemies. Obviously they did that to make it easier for the player, but I think that would have been a good added challenge to avoid. And it might have been the difference between barely making it to the star and instead making it there with about 30 to 60 seconds to spare. I don't know if there's any one of these speed comments that I enjoy. Despite the fact that there are other comments that feel pretty simple, I just feel like every one of these timers are just a bit too long. And I think it just would have been a lot more enjoyable of a comment if you had less time to run through it. Not by much, but enough to maybe finish it with 10 seconds. Especially since these comments are not required to beat the game, only to fully complete it. So I think even if they were concerned to make it too difficult for the casual gamer, I imagine anybody that wanted to go for full completion would have been able to handle it. but as it stands, I think it's just okay. The 6th star is a hidden star in the sun-baked sandcastle. This is a good example of one that is pretty hard to figure out. You'll be moving along this linear path searching everything, but at the same time, there isn't really that much to search. So that either means you're going to spin your wheels, or you're going to defeat a lot more enemies than what need to be defeated. The moment you get to is right here, where you defeat the plant. You may notice as soon as you land on it that there's a wooden stump, but as soon as you land, it's hard to ground pound because the sand level increases so quickly, and most players will just defeat the plant to move on. But if you wait, the sand level will go back down and the stump will be exposed again. I basically only waited for this on a whim. I didn't think it was going to lead me to the star. But once you ground pound on the stump, a bunch of music notes will come out, collect all the music notes, and you can take a launch star to the next area. Basically, a tower will rise, and a bullet bill will chase you, and you gotta lead it to the cage that has the star. I didn't really have to try that hard. As soon as the star popped up, the bullet bill was already right behind me. But after how long it took me to figure out where this location was, I was completely content with that. And really, I was content with all of it. I don't know if I necessarily consider this harder than Freeze Flame Galaxy. I mean, I'm sure it is. It feels like it's longer too. But it feels like it's on par in quality. Remember, I hold Freeze Flame Galaxy to a high regard, and I think it might be one of my favorite stages in the game. And I think Dusty Dune is almost as good as it. I liked Ghostly and Gusty Garden Galaxy, but when I went from those ones to Freeze Flame, I felt like Freeze Flame was a big jump upwards. Dusty Dune Galaxy feels like it's on the same tier as Freeze Flame. So basically, if Good Egg, Honey Hive, and Space Junk Galaxy felt like the low tier early levels, and then Battle Rock and Beach Bowl felt like a jump upwards, the next jump would have been Ghostly and Gusty Garden, and now we're at Freeze Flame and Dusty Dune. I think I've yet to play a stage that was worse than the one that came before it. I may like Honey Hive more than Space Junk, but that's more about the aesthetic and the vibe. And maybe even a preference towards the sandbox, but that doesn't make it a better stage. But even then, I would classify those two in the same quality category. That quality being the type of challenges in the stage as well as the difficulty. So basically every time I go through a stage, it's either of similar quality or a big jump upwards. And so far there have been 3 big jumps in the areas that I just mentioned. Dusty Dune lives up to the high standards set by Freeze Flame. The issue is the next level is Gold Leaf Galaxy. I've yet to analyze it, but as you all know, it is a mirror of Honey Hive Galaxy. I don't want to lazily shrug it off, I'm going to give it a proper analysis, but it will be under a fairly thick microscope. So join me in the next segment to figure out if Gold Leaf Galaxy can live up to Freeze Flame and Dusty Dune.